Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chang-Alfares with the news from the global economy. The first report takes us to the aviation industry, where airplanes may soon be equipped with their very own Iron Dome. And then we go underground to look at coal mining in Baluchistan. First, the headlines. Last-ditch talks between Argentina and the U.S. hedge funds it has branded vultures failed to reach agreement Wednesday, effectively pushing the country into default. Ratings agency Standard & Poor's declared Argentina in selective default even before Economy Minister Axel Kicillof confirmed no deal had been reached. Wednesday marked the deadline for Argentina to make a $539 million payment on debt it had restructured with cooperative exchange creditors after its previous 2001 default. Argentina deposited the sum, but U.S. District Judge Thomas Grisa blocked the bank from forwarding the payment unless it also paid two U.S. hedge funds the full value of their bonds.
Primero, como lo dije, no vamos a firmar.
What will we do? First, like I said, we won't sign any pledge that compromises the future of Argentinians. We're defending the Argentine people. Secondly, we will also defend the debt restructuring we successfully achieved with the agreement of 92.4% of creditors, who they now want to put at risk. We won't allow that to happen. We simply won't.
No lo vamos a permitir.
Despite Standard & Poor's declaring Argentina in selective default, a U.S.-based analyst says a deal with holdout creditors is still possible. Let's see what Peter Hakim of the Inter-American Dialogue had to say.
Even the U.S. Treasury probably would like to see this resolved in a much less combative fashion. So I think they're going to find a way to do it, probably paying the holdout bondholders about what they're paying. The regular bondholders aren't getting paid because of the holdouts. And so there's going to be enormous pressure on the holdouts to accept much less than they had hoped for.
Deflation worries continue in the eurozone as data released on Thursday shows inflation fell further, adding pressure to the European Central Bank to boost the economy. Prices in the single currency area rose by a mere 0.4% in July, its lowest level since the height of the financial crisis. The European Bank considers an inflation rate below 1% as a threat of deflation. Unemployment across the European trade bloc fell slightly to 11.5%. As the U.S. and European Union take the strongest action against Moscow since the Cold War, the geopolitical conflict poses a real threat to the European recovery as well. U.S. government data showed gross domestic product grew at a 4% annualized rate in the second quarter after contracting 2.1% in the first quarter. The better-than-expected data showed solid rebounds in private investment and consumer spending, especially on durable goods like cars and appliances. The Commerce Department also revised upwards its estimates of growth over the previous quarters. Data from payrolls company ADP Wednesday showed private sector job growth remained at a solid pace in July, with a net 218,000 new jobs.
Today, our businesses have added nearly 10 million new jobs over the past 52 months. Construction is up. Manufacturing is back. Our energy, our technology, our auto industries, they're all booming. The unemployment rate is at its lowest point since September of 2008. It's dropped faster than any time in 30 years.
The S&P 500 and NASDAQ ended slightly higher on Wednesday following positive U.S. data, and as the Federal Reserve confirmed it is in no hurry to raise interest rates. The U.S. Central Bank also, as expected, reduced its monthly asset purchases to $25 billion from $35 billion. Among the biggest positives were bank shares, with the S&P Financial Index up 0.4%, while biotechnology stocks boosted the NASDAQ for a second straight day. But while the S&P 500 gained 0.01% and the Nasdaq Composite rose 0.45%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 0.19%. Samsung Electronics on Thursday reported a near 20% decline in second quarter net profit, blaming increased competition from cheap Chinese devices. South Korean electronics giant said net profit came in at $6.1 billion, its lowest figure for 2 years. Despite Samsung's diverse product line, more than half of its profits are generated from mobile devices. Korean won, which is at 6-year highs against the dollar, also chipped away at Samsung's operating profits. Air France flights to and from France are set to be severely disrupted on Saturday after several unions called on workers to go on strike. Ground staff from France's national airline are set to walk out on Saturday on what is expected to be one of the busiest days of the summer holiday season. The airline's main union, CGT Air France, is concerned about the restructuring plan at Air France that will see 8,000 jobs deleted over the next 3 years. The strikers also seek to repeal the Diart law, which forces workers to declare strikes 48 hours in advance to give airline bosses time to bring in replacements. The Iron Dome came into being several years ago, but only when it helped prevent a civilian disaster by intercepting rockets from Gaza did it gain widespread recognition. Following the downing of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17, some political leaders now consider installing anti-missile defense systems on planes as well. Daniel Roth has the details.
Missile defense for civilian aircraft is hot on the agenda now after a Malaysia Airlines flight was shot down by a missile over Ukraine and a rocket from Gaza made a direct hit dangerously close to Israel's Ben Gurion airport. Two members of United States Congress are proposing equipping civilian airplanes with missile defense systems. They are calling for an assessment of whether a new defense program will be worth the costs. With U.S. implementation of such a system on FAA-regulated flight, it could be a boon for Israeli defense contractors. Reportedly, some civilian aircraft in Israel have been using an Israeli-built early warning radar and a flare diversion system called Flight Guard since the mid-2000s. Eran Ramot, aviation expert, explains the root of this technology and its limitations as it works to deceive missiles.
In 2002, an Arkia airplane in Mombasa was shot. A missile was shot at this airplane, and luckily enough, the missile did not hit the airplane, out of pure luck. Then the government of Israel decided to put defense system on the airplanes. We knew at that time, we knew how to defend combat aircraft from heat-seeking missiles. But it is in many ways unsafe for civilian airplanes, for civilian airports, because it's pyrotechnic. For practical purposes, the rocket that is fired from Gaza is like a stone that is thrown very far away.
He explains that the rockets from Gaza are unguided, and if they hit anything, it is more chance than anything. Which means that the anti-missile systems are not rocket-related. Now another Israeli company, Elbit Systems, has come up with a safer laser-guided anti-missiles defense unit through a government-funded project called Sky Shield, which uses a program known as Sea Music to help planes avoid missile threats. The project cost many tens of millions of dollars, according to Ramot, and has other costs associated with it.
Like I mentioned, the price per flight is negligible in terms of big economy. It costs. The system has a weight. A weight in civil aviation means fuel, means money. It does create an additional price per each flight in terms of fuel because of the weight, in terms of fuel because of the drag the system creates.
This could mean passengers pay more, but it is hard to tell exactly how much. What is clear is that the cost of putting a system in place is $1 million per aircraft. But it's a cost that he says is worth it.
All in all together, it does cost money. I think it's worth the ticket price. In terms of the passenger, the flyers, if it makes him feel safer, which it is, then how much can you pay? How much can you measure the safer flight conditions?
Ramot tells us that the system is already in play on some flights, tested and finalized, though he declined to give further details.
Coal mining is one of the major industries in Baluchistan, but a lack of infrastructure and frequent accidents mean that the area has yet to hit its potential. Here's the story.
Baluchistan in Pakistan's southwest. This region has for years been a hotbed of insurgency and instability. Yet it's an area that's rich in resources, and here in this village, coal mining is the biggest employer. But it's not a job for the faint-hearted.
The mines here are deeper than 1,800 feet, and 18 to 20 people work in each mine. This is a dangerous job, and we risk our life at every moment. We are compelled to leave our home behind, and we're here for livelihood.
Insurgency, earthquakes and accidents mean that life here is tough. In 2011, a gas explosion underground killed 45 miners.
My son and 2 others were working inside this mine. One was a local Baloch, the other a villager. Suddenly there was a blast inside the mine. They died, and their bodies were pulled out from the mine after 13 hours.
Pakistan, in spite of its resources, analysts say, is still energy inefficient. Baluchistan produces a mere 100,000 tons of coal a year, a fraction of what's required to meet the country's power needs.
The coal we extract is bituminous coal. It's a second grade of coal. We provide it to brick kilns and steel mills. I strongly recommend that we use coal for generating electricity. It would resolve the power crisis and meet the energy demands of households.
Infrastructure remains outdated in many parts of Pakistan, and upgrading the energy sector is a priority in a country where in some regions electricity is available for just 4 hours a day.
And we stay underground as we look at how the tunnel system in Gaza underpinned the Desert Strip's economy and allowed Hamas to hold on despite an international blockade. We're joined by Karen Kirsch and Media Watch. Thanks for joining us. So enlighten us about Gaza here.
Well, there's quite a few stories, particularly in Israeli media, in the past couple of days, in Calcalist, in DeMarker, exploring tunnels and tunnel economy.
Right.
And tunnel economy is much, much, much more than terror tunnels.
Right.
As we report on them on the news on a regular basis.
Much of it had to do with smuggling.
Yes, definitely. Most of it has to do with smuggling. It's trading tunnels. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands of them.
Right.
And they actually supplied Gaza of most of its trades. Anything from cars to food, building materials, fuels, electronics, clothes, everything.
Right.
And that's an industry that developed and really sort of created what is now being called as underground Gaza.
Right.
And a new profession that employed, again, thousands of people. Tunnel miners, tunnel traders, smugglers who go across.
Right.
At its peak, around 2012, National Geographic reported that about 15,000 people were working in the tunnels on a daily basis, which is really outstanding. And this is in Gaza that has unbearable unemployment.
Right. Yet at the same time, I can't imagine that it's the greatest employment either.
Of course it's not, but it did provide a lot of the goods coming into Gaza for 2 reasons. One is that goods that are forbidden to trade with it from Israel go through Israel, and the other is cheaper goods through Egypt.
Right.
And also Hamas, as a government, had an interest to allow for these tunnels to flow, because on the trades coming in from the tunnels they could
taxes.
collect, and quite a lot.
Something like $750 million is what I read personally.
Yes. It's really a staggering amount. It's about, let's say, 3,000 tons of cement and other building materials went through the tunnel each day, because this is something that was not allowed to trade through Israel, and Hamas would collect something around $20 for each ton. Amazing. So that sort of gives you an indication of how much they've lost when the smuggling tunnels stopped working, which happened early this year in March, when the Egyptians shut down about 1,400 tunnels.
Right. Of course, this doesn't really explain why the tunnels would go to Israel. I mean, this explains why we go through.
Yeah, it's a different kind of. It's a different kind of tunnel.
Right.
It's considered less effective, and that's why it's easier to ruin.
What do you mean? The tunnel going to Egypt is less effective?
The tunnel going to Egypt, they were less deep. They were using cheaper and weaker cement to create it. It was very evident that the real infrastructure going into the tunnel went to the terror tunnels, which explains why they're still here, and the Egyptians managed to
the Egyptians managed to really just demolish the majority of the tunnels going into Egypt.
Yes, and that really sort of had a staggering effect on the economy of Gaza this year. The unemployment rate jumped from somewhere around 20-something to
40-some%.
Yeah. To 40%. It's really and again buying goods, and it had a really positive effect on growth in Gaza, and now it's going the other way around. So this is going to be a very interesting thing to see how Gaza functions for a long time with blockade and without tunnels.
I gotcha. Well, I hope that we will actually see a peaceful resolution to this situation. Thank you very much, Karen Kirsch, for joining us. That takes us to the end of this edition of the Economy Magazine, your daily source for economic and financial reports at I-24 News. I'm Benjamin Faris. Please join us on Twitter, send us your comments on the website, and see you again tomorrow.